Hello. I'm going to talk indeed about the Roosvijk, and it is a story that has been told quite a few times already. Also at the NAS conference at the beginning when we started to do our excavation. But today I want to talk a little bit about some other stuff. So the Roosvijk, a history based on archaeology, archival, and genealogical research. So first, a quick introduction for those who have not heard about the Roosvijk or don't know much about it. So this is a project, the Roosvijk, the hashtag Roosvijk 1740, and a cooperation between Historic England as the owner of the area where the ship went down, which is on the Goodwin Sands in the south coast of the UK. The Netherlands, because we are, or we claim to be the owners of VOC ships, Admiralty ships, and WIC, West India Company ships, and warships, and MSDS Marine, who has been the manager of activities in the UK. So our Minister of Education, Culture and Science has given €2 million to do an excavation on this site. And when doing an archaeological excavation, you never know exactly what you will get. So we thought that it would be important to not only do an excavation of the site from a scientific point of view, but also have some other stuff joined in, which were, for example, setting up an example international cooperation between different countries, to have a platform for students to work on the site, and to also include avocational diving community, the NAS, with the work that we've done, and especially also the avocational diving was. And for us, actually, quite an extreme privilege to have, because in the Netherlands it is very difficult to do activities together with the avocational divers. So we wanted to prove to the Dutch government that this kind of cooperation is beneficial for the archaeological research. So some numbers. For the Roosvijk project, 65 archaeological and historical specialists have been involved. 21 students have done their internship on the site. There have been training sessions for avocationals in conjunction with the NAS of 170 persons. We've done 400 surface supply dives on the site. More than 2,000 objects have been recovered. 1,600 people have attended open days. And then on the virtual part, 20,000 people have done a virtual dive or looked into the 3D models on the website. And we had one of our posts, we regularly post new discoveries, which I will talk about later. On the website on Facebook, and one of those had more than 40,000 people that looked to that object, which was the chest with thumbnails. And then we had a short. We had an exhibition in the Fries Museum in the Netherlands, which was visited in Corona time, or half in Corona time, by 35,000 people. So that was quite good. So that was just a quick some numbers of the Roosvijk project. But I actually want to tell you just a story, which I find important. So it was late in the evening on the 9th of January 1740, and maybe it was already early the 10th, but it was very, very, very cold. It was minus 10 degrees, minus 20 degrees. And on top of that was a big storm raging on the North Sea, and 4 ships were on its way to the East Indies, to Batavia, and to get some supplies and people to the VOC there. These 4 ships were the Berkenrode, Beukenstein, Vis, and the Roosvijk. The storm blew from the northeast in a pitch dark night, and nobody could see where they were going. The waves were so high, the ships were lost, they lost each other, and quickly the battle was on to keep them afloat against the wind, the ice on the North Sea, and the undetectable coast, the shallowness, and of course, this bitter cold. 2 ships returned to the Republic. One made it safe and sheltered in front of the English coast, and the Roosvijk, nobody knew. Just imagine 230 people trying to keep the ship afloat on its course while the ropes were breaking in their hands, because those ropes were frozen as well, they were from hemp. Imagine the clothes that they were wearing, they were cold, they were wet. There was so much noise of the winds, of the water, maybe some voices here and there, but they could hardly understand each other. And then it all ended with a ship that was lost with all hands and with cargo. So the storm raged for several days. After that, when it became calm, there was some debris that was washing up shore, and one of the things was a box with letters. And these letters were given to Hendrik Hop, who was the Dutch representative in London, and he immediately sent those letters to the directors of the VOC with some accounts from people that had seen and heard things when they were in Deal. Losing this ship, this VOC ship, the Roosvijk, was of course very tragic, but especially unfortunate for the VOC, because they lost 300,000 guilders. And those 300,000 guilders were very important to keep the trade going on in the East Indies. So the only thing that they could do, the Dutch East India Company, was to get another 300,000 guilders and put them on another ship and sail them out to Batavia. And this was done on the Kasteel van Boeren, another VOC ship. So then it became quiet and everything was forgotten. But in 2000s, around the early 2000s, Ken Welling found the ship, found evidences of the Roosvijk on the Goodwin Sands. And the first excavation was done in 2005, where a lot of the money the bullion was taken up. And the project #Roosvijk 7040 started from, let's say, from around 2015-16, with an excavation in 2017 and 2018. And that was to save some important information on the wreck site, because the wreck was endangered because of erosion, and it was now at the Heritage of Risk list. Historic England and the RCE made an agreement to do this project together. And so a multidisciplinary research started with archaeology, archival research, historical research, genealogical research, and also seabed research. The archival research, I hope you can see it, we found quite a few people. Here are 19 names of the captain, an undermergent, a navigator, second mate, third watch, master surgeon, and you can keep on going. See where they come from: Amsterdam, of course, Leiden, Rotterdam, Kristiansand in Norway. So if we look at these people, we see that they come from all over in the Netherlands, especially coastal towns, but also from Germany, Norway, and Sweden. We see that quite a few of them do also come from maritime towns, and those are especially the people who became working as seamen as sailors on the ship. But most of the soldiers, they came from the England. So we see that a lot of people come from the Netherlands, but approximately 1/3 of the people that we've identified come from other countries in Europe. A part of the center of Germany is very strongly related to the Netherlands. They even in church, they had the same church and they spoke Dutch in church. But very interesting is, although from the 230 people, we only found a few people back at this moment, we see that there are officers, we see that there are sailors, and we see that there are soldiers. So they come from the 3 different groups in the ship. The question is, how did these people end up in the ship, and why? Why did they come to the Netherlands? Actually, this picture, as you see here, is the Roosvijk. This is the house, the Roosvijk, which was owned by a former VOC director, and the ship was named after this house. This house doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but this was the house where it was named at. So how did these people end up? Well, we have to just take a larger view and a bird view on Europe in the 18th century. And then we see that the international trade of the Netherlands declined, especially in relation to the UK. And it was still a prosperous city, a country, and due to the fact that the amount of inhabitants also declined in the Netherlands, fresh people were needed badly. But as you see here, that between 1700 and 1800, the amount of people living in Europe went up from 110 million to 180 million. So there was a large search for work, and in the Netherlands, this work could be found, and especially for the VOC. So around 25 to 50% of all people going to the East Indies in each year of the 18th century was foreign. So there were a lot of foreign people working for the VOC, and they came from Scandinavia, as said, the Netherlands, Germany, but from many other countries in Europe, especially Germany. So the population in Europe grew. People were looking for work. Sometimes people stayed for a while in the Netherlands, enough to earn money and to go back to their own country. Others stayed permanently, like many young Germans and Scandinavians. And they were often poor and ended up in the ghettos of the cities in the lower social ranks. The Netherlands, they were called the Republic, had around 2 million inhabitants at that time. And Amsterdam was its largest city, and it had 200,000 people. And the provinces, the 7 provinces, were Friesland, Gelder, Holland, Overijssel, Groningen, Utrecht, and Zeeland. But if you look at it carefully, we see that they talk Dutch, Lower Saxon, West Frisian, and sometimes had more with the people from Germany than from the people from Amsterdam. So there were multiple dialects spoken. Not everybody could easily understand each other. So Amsterdam, 200,000 inhabitants. That was less than in its heydays in the 17th century, but it was still an important market. And especially it had a very special position in the silver trade. So a lot of silver was traded through Amsterdam. The city was a transit point. Ships came, traded their goods. They went into smaller ships, larger ships, European trade, international trade, and people stayed there and just hopped on other ships like Hansen or like Root. Although from Hansen we know that he stayed, and he was from Norway, and he was from a coastal town in Norway, and Ruth came from Gotland in Sweden, and from Hansen we know that he married in Amsterdam, so he probably stayed there. He was supposed to stay there. Unfortunately, after he died 3 months later, his daughter was born, and he was not the only one who had a child after dying. So this just shows the tragedy of all the people on board. Amsterdam was multicultural because of the fact that they had such a central place in the market. So there were many nationalities, but also there was a small black community. There were different religions, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, very tiny Muslim, but they were there. Was there a freedom of religion? Well, it was a little bit, but they were not always able to show it openly. So there were restrictions. And the city had areas where there were rich people living, and there were poor areas. There were also areas outside of the city where rich people had their larger mansions, houses. So there was a lot of money in the city. There were influential, influential families. The new rich were there. And so you can also imagine that there was quite a lot of tension in the city as well. In this light of different nationalities, rich, poor people, there was also the tension between religion and science. Slowly, people started to collect large collections. You see a very nice picture of some historical collections, and within the Enlightenment, everything was investigated, and there became a tension between the science and the religion. But this searching for everything was stimulated due to all the contacts with different cultures and countries and people, and a lot of private collections were established. And some of them, or some of the rich people that collected and put on big collections were financiers of the Roosvijk. So they probably had the hope to enrich their collections whenever the Roosvijk came back. The city was thriving on its own with all those tensions. But the crew of the people, they had to come from everywhere, as I said. So I just want to quickly go through the way people ended up in Amsterdam. So they came from the north of Germany, for example, in the middle of Germany and Amsterdam. From Amsterdam to the Texel roads, they went, of course, when they ended up in Amsterdam. And I will show you a bit from the routes from Texel to the East Indies. So if you came from the north of Germany, you went to Amsterdam, like these three people, Groothuis, Beekman, and Haas did. They came from Germany. And there's also a small or a younger boy who came from Friesland, but he went to Amsterdam a little bit earlier. But he could have made it with a ship over the Zuiderzee and then to the harbor of Amsterdam. But the other people, they went, so Groothuis, Beekman, and Haas, they went possibly to the border of Groningen, to Nieuweschans, and through an ingenious track of canals and waterway that connected the north of the Netherlands to Amsterdam, and even to further south they went on with tugboats. Here you can see the Netherlands with vast amounts of water, and if you look very carefully in the north of the Netherlands, you see these tracks where the boats connected, canals and rivers connected the northeast of the Netherlands with the Zuiderzee, and from the Zuiderzee you could go to Amsterdam. And this is what they did, and there was a whole network of these routes. And the special thing about it is that you could plan your trip. You knew exactly you could go from, let's say, 4 to 5 days from Bremen to the Netherlands, and you knew when you would arrive, which is quite amazing, and it was affordable as well. So that was a very good thing. However, if you came from the center of Germany and you wanted to come to Amsterdam, then you probably also needed to have a stagecoach or a diligence. Hofferman was the master surgeon, and also Müller came from the center of Germany, from Soest. They probably had to go parts of their trip with a stagecoach, which was less comfortable than the diligence, but much cheaper. The big problem about the discomfort of these kind of coaches was, of course, the fact that there were quite a lot of robbers on the way to Amsterdam, and that was because of the fact that there were quite a lot of out-of-job soldiers, and they were taking the professional bandit. So it wasn't a very safe ride, and it wasn't a very comfortable ride. But also there was you could plan your trip, so you could get in Amsterdam in quite a good way. If they would have arrived there, they may have had a place already recommended by somebody. Those people were often lucky. Otherwise, they were picked out by people and who gave them a place in the many inns of the town. And if they were very unlucky, they slept in a very bad place for a very high price, and they got into debt, and then they had to earn back their money by going on board of a VOC ship, which wasn't the most or the best maritime profession working on the VOC, but you had some chances of earning good money. And the VOC was trying to get the personnel, because they were always in lack of people, but they also had some quality checks. So not everybody just could be working on at the VOC. Hofferman, for example, this surgeon, master surgeon, he had to take an exam before he could work at the VOC. But also simple sailors, they had to answer questions in order to make an estimate if they could do their job or not. And if they couldn't, they were sent home, and maybe they tried again and again until they had a job at the VOC. So all these people came to Amsterdam, and they had a job, so they had to wait for another job, and they were within the city. But if they finally had a place on a ship, they didn't just step from the harbor on the ship and then sailed out to the east to the Dutch Indies. They had to go from Amsterdam to the Texel Roads, which was in the Waddenzee, and that was because the Zuiderzee was very shallow and fully loaded ships couldn't sail to the East Indies. So they went with a skeleton crew and quite empty to the Texel Roads, and there the other persons came on board, the full crew came on board with the cargo. So everybody was shipped with small ships to the Texel Road. So that could take quite a few times. The shallowness was very high in Pampus, very close to the harbor of Amsterdam, where they had sea camels to lift up the ships, as you can see in this picture, and to lift them over the sandbanks and sail further to the Texel Roads. So you needed to have quite an organization to get everybody, ship and personnel, to the Texel Roads. And here you see a picture of the roads with people waiting to sail out. Like the Roosvijk, they had to wait there, and sometimes they had to wait there for a very long time. So in the winter of 1739, 1740, the Roosvijk was waiting for to sail out, but the wind wasn't very favored. The temperature was not too bad. It wasn't very cold, but it came from the west, so they had to wait from the southwest. So they had to wait for quite a while, and then when it turned, it became colder and colder and colder. And we can imagine that they had to make the last arrangements to put the last cargo on board, to get the last people on board, to have a check from the VOC before they had to go out, and it became colder and colder and colder. And then the ice was forming on the Texel roads, which was quite a shallow area, so that posed a threat. So when were they leaving? Were they staying because the weather was getting worse? It was getting cold, or were they leaving so that they would have a good so they had a good moment when they arrived in the Cape of Good Hope and the right winds to sail further to Batavia. So they chose in the end with a northeastern wind and the very cold temperatures, they chose to leave because otherwise they may have been caught in the ice, and that could have posed other problems. So they went off, and that was a very bad choice. But they wanted to have these right winds for the Cape of Good Hope. Well, there was no Good Hope anymore, as we know now. So if you see the map of the Netherlands here, I'll just turn it a bit. You see the island of Texel, and here they were probably laying, and they sailed out through these shallows, between the shallows, and out to the North Sea. And so we see a newspaper from the 11th of January, Amsterdam, the 11th of January. On the 8th, from Texel sailed the Bergenrode, Roosvijk, Beukestein, and Vis. Yeah, so you see, it's the 11th already. The ship went down at least one day earlier. Of course, nobody knew at that time what tragedy had happened. So, historically, we can track the people, and we can track these people because not because the books of the ship have been saved, because we didn't know anybody except for the captain, Daniel Roncheres, that was on the ship. But we know who they are, who the people are, because of some paper tracks, because of the fact that people borrowed money to bring along to the East Indies. I will tell you about that. So therefore, the people from the archives, Willem Jan and Els Grondel, for example, they did an archival research, and there's a big citizen science project at the Amsterdam Archives where people found names of people borrowing money from other persons, and the International Institute for Social History also did some research on different people on board of the ship. So finally, we are finding people that were on the ship, but not because of the books of the VOC, but because of other archival research. So the wreck is now under threat, or was under threat, and we've done some constant monitoring of the site, and we decided to do the excavation of the ship. First, we did a monitoring in 2016, and then in 2017 we started to do an excavation, which continued in 2018, two different ships. And you see some pictures where we did some surface supply diving. We are able to tell a good archaeological story in combination with a historical account, because of the fact that we have meticulously noted down every find on the seabed. That's very important because only in this way we can see if something is cargo or something is maybe personal possession of people. And that's what we wanted to know. So we used sonodyne techniques to acoustically record objects. We had archaeologists underwater measuring and people, an archaeologist on board recording at the same time in the system. So this is very well documented, and all this data we are now processing at the moment. After each dive, every diver had to tell what he had done, and these discussions also added up to the understanding of the site. We recorded large parts of the site underwater at 26 meters by 3D photogrammetry. That's now, I think, almost standard for a lot of people, a lot of archaeologists. But now we can go back to the site. We also did the same with large objects and smaller objects, and you can find those on the website. So I'll give you. This is a 3D representation of a chunk of cannonballs. So after the excavation, where we found more than 2,000 objects, they all went to Fort Cumberland, where the objects are being conserved by conservators from Historic England and MSDS Marine. And there's more to be discovered, because every time we do an X-ray of an object, we find new objects. Every time something is being conserved or prepared, concretions are being worked at, we find new stuff. So this is really, really exciting. The excavation hasn't stopped after the diving. This is just something that keeps on continuing at least until 2021. But due to the COVID, we have to see when we have finished everything. We have a bit of a setback on that. So just to give you an example, this was a large concretion, and it shows you a very nice the different shots from that were used on this VOC ship, this East Indian. But what is this? You can probably can't recognize it, but if we take an X-ray, then we see, look very carefully first, but we see two pistols, so dual pistols, a set of dual pistols. If we, this was completely concreted and into a concretion pewter jug, and we see that the VOC mark is on it with the A on top of it, of the Amsterdam chamber. So we discover things every time. What is this, for example? We take an X-ray and we see that this is another pewter jug, and it has spoons inside. Very exciting. So we find all these things from the galley area. With the galley that we found underwater, the concretions that we took up, the objects that we could already recognize, we took up, and now we can make a reconstruction of what was happening around the galley at that time and what people were using. We sample everything, so we find evidences of the food that people were using. But what is this? This is a cheese form. At least the cheese stayed into shape when it was traveling from the Netherlands to the hot climate of the East Indies, and in a period of 8 months. If they wouldn't have protected the cheese like this, it would be melting and would have disappeared. So we found quite a few of them. Weights for weighting cargo, goods. But the interesting thing about this is that we have the date 1739 on it, which is quite just before the ship went out. So all these things we discover during the pre-field work. And we learn more and more and more, and we need to take time to do that. These are half products like sabers. We can learn a lot about them on the metal quality, for example, also the way they were shipped. We have knives, different kind of knives, loads of them, cargo, but also beads on the ship. Beads were usually used for trade, and now they are probably a private possession. Why were they taken on board? Where do these beads come from? Where are they produced? This is what we are trying to find out at the moment. But what do you think of this thing? This is a medal of King Frederick IV from Denmark and Norway from 1770. And it was to celebrate the 200 years of Protestant Reformation that started by Martin Luther. And it was welded on a coin so that it could be put into a jacket. So whose jacket was it? Was it maybe from Hansen, the one from the south of Norway, or maybe Weiland? Weiland is another guy on board of the ship whose parents were Lutheran and from Norway. He himself was born in the Netherlands. So we don't know, or maybe somebody else, because we only have a few. We lifted up quite a lot of large pieces of the ship construction, which we are drawing at the moment, sampling for dendrochronology. This is a very large knee of the first deck, so it shows us the size of the hold of the ship, and we're still producing that. But the last thing that I want to show you, I'm almost through my time. So the last group are the coins, and I've been talking about this before, but there was official and unofficial silver on board of the ship. And I'll give you a brief summary why that was the case. And this is a very interesting story, which is continuing because it's about the silver trade, basically about the modern, the start of the modern economy trade. What you see here is a pillar dollar. These pillar dollars were made in Mexico. And together with the corps that you see here, also from Mexico, mainly from Mexico, and the silver bars with this big VOC mark in Amsterdam on top of it, this was VOC money. This was the money, the 300,000 guilders that the VOC brought to the East Indies. And they were packed in chests like you can see in the lower right corner. They had a good quality. China wanted to have them for the porcelain and the tea. So this is what they wanted to do. But silver was worth 40% more in value in the East Indies in comparison to the Netherlands. So 40% more. And this meant that if you would just bring silver to the East Indies, you could become rich. You didn't sell it immediately yourself to the VOC, but you gave it to a middleman, and the middleman sold it to the VOC. While you were going on a ship of the VOC, people were smuggling silver themselves. And it went up to almost 50% of all the silver on board of the ship. So everybody had silver with them, and some had it from their families. They collected all the money, all the silver together, and brought it with them in the hope that they could give the return when they came back, or when at least they had handed it over to the VOC, so the VOC could give them an exchange letter for the coins. But sometimes they just borrowed money. They borrowed money from banks. They borrowed money from rich other persons, and these people had to. So they had to make a kind of at the notaire. They had to make an official letter about these things that they borrowed. So in a way, they did something illegal, but there were official trails of this borrowing of the money. So this is why we discover all these people on board of the Roosvijk. So if you see this lump of concretion, and on the right side you see an X-ray, you see the coins, you see a bucket, a buckle, you see some of the beads, and you see copper rings that were for probably for bags of coins, and so they look very personal, right? And if you look very carefully, when we prepared it out, you see the copper rings, but you also see the coin, which is a different coin, and you see there's a little hole in that coin, and that coin and that little hole was there to carry it on your body, or to hide it in your clothes so that nobody could steal it. And this shows the way that people were smuggling the money. So these were the private coins. Those were the silver riders from the north of the Netherlands, of the northern provinces, and some south Netherlands ducatons. Those were of less good quality, but they still contained silver, so they were good to smuggle. And then we had the little coins, the 6 stuiver shillingen. They were actually devaluated in the Netherlands and could not be used in the Netherlands anymore, so they were taken to the East Indies because they might have been worth a bit more. So smuggling of money eventually, so it's through this opportunism and through the smuggling of the money by all ranks on board, and due to the fact that it was forbidden, but also a little bit allowed, that there wasn't as much as half the amount of money on board of the ship. That was the smuggling money. It's also the reason that the people on board took financial risks by taking other people's money with them, or borrowed money from the banks and the merchantmen that were written down by the notary, because the crew, because some of the crew members, they borrowed at least several years of salary, and because they died on the trip with the Roosvijk, this led to court cases. This led to people trying to settle on the debts of the borrowed money, and this is why we can identify them. So basically, we discovered them because of these tragedies, and we give them away in a way a virtual life again. So sometimes these illegal activities pay off after death, we can say. The last thing that I want to say is that these families of the people that died on the Roosvijk, they were never compensated by the VOC, because they were not working for more than 2 months for the company, and so they had no rights of any salary, which is, of course, very crude, but that's what happened. But we can give them a face. So if you want to know more about the Roosvijk, because we're still doing a lot of research, there is a virtual museum at the Huiges ING website, which I put down the link to. There's a virtual dive trail you can do, see how it, so you can dive through the remnants of the wreck, and you can get a lot of information while doing so. We have a Facebook page. We're on the cultureleerfgoed.nl website. We have a lot of information about the Roosvijk. And of course, you can visit mas.cultureleerfgoed.nl, where you can find a lot of shipwrecks besides the Roosvijk, all with very nice stories, but also reference materials, so you can use it as a scientific archive as well of information. What is still to come? Well, hopefully after the COVID crisis, I hope that people can come to Fort Cumberland again and to see how the conservation is proceeding. We will be publishing some scientific publications on all the different research that we're doing. Just think about the fact that we have 65 scientists working on the wreck. But we will also make a final book of the excavation, and there's going to be only in Dutch, unfortunately, but a novel about the people on board of the Roosvijk. That's going to be published in the first half of 2021. So thank you very much.